The issue of palliative to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy by the President Tinubu administration has been receiving reactions in the country. Yesterday, the House of Reps approved a request for 819.5 billion naira, and that's from the Supplementary Appropriation Act of 2022 to provide some sort of palliatives that will cushion the effect of removing fuel subsidy. Let's take a look at the breakdown of how this particular money will be disbursed. We understand that 500 billion naira out of that money would be for palliatives and other capital expenditure to cushion the effect of the recent subsidy removal policy. Over 185 billion naira would go to the Ministry of Works and Housing to alleviate the impact of the severe flooding experienced in 2022, and that will be used for road infrastructure across the 6 geopolitical zones. There's a 19 billion naira that will be disbursed to the Federal Minister of Agriculture to ameliorate the massive destruction of farmlands across the country during the severe flooding experienced last year. And 35 billion naira would go to the National Judicial Council, 10 billion naira to the Federal Capital Territory Administration for critical projects, and 70 billion naira to the National Assembly. We understand that that is meant to support the working conditions of new members. We're still following closely the details of this particular disbursement. We had a new member of the House of Reps join us yesterday. He's of the opinion that it's not for individual members, but that just the same way judiciary had its share, that the legislature is also an arm of government, and it's for the operation of the National Assembly. In the Red Chamber, the president sought the approval of the Nigerian Senate for an additional $800 million loan facility. This one is for the National Social Safety Net Program approved by the Federal Executive Council under the President Buhari Administration. Under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, we understand that federal government will transfer 8,000 naira per month via digital transfer to 12 million poor and low-income households for a period of 6 months, with what government calls a multiplier effect on about 60 million individuals. Joining me now is a project management consultant, is also chairman of Progressives Congress UK chapter. I understand that Mr. Tunde Doherty is in Abuja. I also have economist and public affairs analyst Ebere Duru. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program. Mr. Doherty, let's begin with you. We now have an idea of federal government's intervention plan for fuel subsidy. What do you make of the 500 billion naira that has now been approved for palliatives and capital expenditure in this regard?
Thank you very much, Nifemi, for having me once again. Good evening, Nigerians. And this is to testify that the government of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu means business, and the business is to make sure life has meanings to both low, poor, average Nigerians. The palliative is a welcome benefit to the less privileged and the most poorer affected families in this country. Palliatives are welcome. They are resources that are sought to cushion the effect of any inflation or any sort of ills that the nation is going through. We know that since the removal of the first subsidy, it's been so very tough on Nigerians, and this is a
All right, Mr. Doherty seems to be making a case in support of the federal government in that regard. We lost connection with him, but let's turn to Mr. Duru. The word palliative itself brings to mind a lot of unpleasant memories. The COVID-19 experience, there's also the efforts of former President Goodluck Jonathan to provide some palliatives. If you remember, during the initial attempt at removing fuel subsidy in 2012. What do you make of government's track record in this regard?
The track record is right very on the commendable pace, because when you look at it, every nation is suffering from quite a lot of economic downturn now, and for the president to find it so great to push this bill to the National Assembly, and for the National Assembly to approve this 800 billion money for palliative is a welcome idea. It's a welcome thing for all Nigerians. And we give kudos to the president. Since his inauguration, he has not stopped working. He has taken, he's a workaholic. He started working since the day one. And we have seen that he is very passionate about Nigerians, about the masses, especially the poor and the low-income Nigerians. Right, if you look at the breakdown of the palliative, 12 million homes, 12 million poor homes and low-income earners will benefit from this. And they have I marked 8,000 for each person for the next 6 months that will be digitally transferred to them. The former president has done something in this regard by creating a means of giving money to people in terms of cushioning the effect of inflation within the system. And this is a follow-on in a positive, progressive direction to Nigerians.
All right.
By the time this takes place, we'll see the effect of all of this in agriculture, in helping the farmers to produce and helping and making sure that there's.
Let me butt in very quickly, Mr. Doherty. Yeah, I'll come back to you. Let's bring in Ebere Duru into this conversation. Do you agree that we've had a pleasant track record in this area in the past years?
Okay, thank you again, and good evening, viewers. The truth is, if you check our records as regards social intervention programs, you see that really the government has not done well. And we don't want to have a situation again where we'll go back to what happened during the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, where you allocate 500 billion every month for feeding of school children. And even when the COVID lockdown was in place and enforced, we still had monies being reported to have been used for feeding of the same children at home. We don't want such situation to arise again. The humanitarian or the conditional cash transfer of the past government, if anybody were to be very sincere and means well for this country, we say it the way it is, it was a failure, because we didn't have any form of audit trail for what was happening and what was going on. Yes, there needed to be palliatives for the removal of fuel subsidy. We all agree to this. But the dynamics and the flow for which we are going to execute this is what is in question. Transferring 8,000 naira to 12 million poor people. Let's do the calculation very simply. 8,000 naira for 1 million people is 8 billion naira. 8,000 naira for 10 million homes is 80 billion. So if we're talking about 12 million homes, we're talking about 96 billion in a month, right, being transferred to people. The first thing is this: we don't want a situation where we will think, okay, this is our local syndrome. The other people did theirs. Nobody is calling them to come and account for all the conditional cash transfers. Now it is our turn. Let us also have our own bite of the national cake. This is not the message we want to send to people.
All right, Mr. Duru, so in fairness to the Tinubu administration, I want to just remind you that this is funding the 2023 budget deficit. So the loan facility, just a minute, sir. The loan facility for the National Social Safety Net Program was approved by the Federal Executive Council under the previous administration. You know, the World Bank has talked about how the 10.7 trillion naira 2023 budget couldn't have been financed whether we removed subsidy or not. So my question to you is, you don't seem to have a problem with the palliative, but how it was implemented in the past. How do you think that can be fixed in the coming months?
Okay, good. palliatives can come in different dimensions. For instance, the conditional cash transfers. Rather than transferring money to individuals, 8,000 in a month, what can it do? We can use this as palliatives for the SMEs. Remember that the major drivers, I'm sure Mr. Doherty will agree with me, that the major driver of any successful economy in the world are the SMEs. Why don't we give them these funds as palliatives? We can do what we call not trader money, please, but well-structured, no interest. I didn't say low. I said no interest at all. No interest loans, right? No interest at all. In other words, these businesses that are struggling today, that have their annual turnover less than probably 500 million, between 100 million and 200 million annual turnover, you know that these are micro businesses, right? Why don't you give them these funds? They go to the bank with their proper documentation and collaterals, get access, easy access to these loans, stimulate their businesses. The man who is a fashion designer out there is using the mechanical machine. He needs the industrial machine to boost productivity. The man who is a leather manufacturer is using probably his mortar and pestle or whatever to beat that leather and all that. He needs some machinery, this little smaller machinery that are low-cost machinery to stimulate his business. What he does eventually is take people out of, because he's going to need probably somebody who's going to be learning an apprentice. He's going to need somebody who is going to probably a laborer and all that. Take people out of the unemployment sector. And if you say for you to have access to this loan, you must have a registered company. What you now have is the people playing in the informal sector. A lot of them rush to the CAC to get registered as incorporated, either business name, sole proprietorship, or incorporated businesses. They go to the banks, easy access to these loans with proper documentations, without interest. This is what we call palliative. It stimulates the economy, drags some people out of poverty, helps people to get gainfully employed. And do you know what? These people pay back these loans because it is properly structured. You can give it to other people. The chain reaction continues.
Let's